Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Lara Vaughn, and I will be your moderator for this session. On behalf of the International Colloquium Planning Team and the CGDSD Directorate Board, I'd like to welcome you to the second session of the 2026 International Colloquium. This year, we are proud to present a series of 4 webinars as part of our colloquium. Before we get started, I would like to share that here at ACPA, we are invested in the idea of equity, and I would like to share our equity and inclusion statement with you. Please take some time to read and understand ACPA's commitment to equity and inclusion, and that will be shared in the chat. The colloquium will explore the overarching theme of facing uncertainty, global student development in times of fear and change. Oh, okay, I'm a little bit off on the slides. Yes, inclusion statement. All right. We are also excited to share that our commission is actively recruiting new directorate board members. Involvement in the directorate provides the opportunity for ongoing engagement with colleagues with a shared interest in international education and cross-cultural learning. We have up to 10 open positions. The application deadline is 11:59 p.m. EST on May 15th, 2026. The application form link will be in the chat. And so before we get started, please introduce yourself in the chat box with the following information, such as your name, pronouns, where are you currently located, tribal names that you're on, if applicable, your position, and your institution and organization. So if you could share some of that in the chat, that would be great. So for today's colloquium session, it's titled Resilience and Critical Hope as Strategies for Navigating Instability. Unfortunately, Dr. Natalie Cruz is not able to join us today. She had a family emergency. However, we do have Darius Robinson, who is a doctoral candidate at Florida State University, who's joining us. So this presentation explores how critical hope can be utilized by both students and higher education professionals during the current challenges and instabilities facing international populations in the United States. Darius Robinson is a doctoral candidate in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at Florida State University. His research concerns the experiences of students of color with a focus on Black male leadership and liberation. Currently, he is working on his dissertation research concerning how Black male student leaders experience and enact critical hope in today's climate. I would now like to invite Darius to please share his presentation. Darius, off to you. You are muted.
I should be past the times of muting and talking. But first, Laura, thank you for the warm welcome that you provided. I'm very excited to be here and to talk with everyone. I was saying good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are here. My name is Darius Robinson, and I'm excited to talk to you about working towards a world of critical hope. I have been looking into this topic for quite a while, and I'm excited to be able to share with you some of my thoughts and perspectives regarding where critical hope is, what critical hope is, and how you can utilize it in your day to day. To kind of kick us off first, I wanted to ask some quick questions, and please feel free to drop your answers into the chat. So take a couple of minutes to do this. But when it comes to critical hope, one piece is always finding
Okay.
Girls also pay for their own dresses, so that's something Cindy doesn't have to worry about. Girls pay for their own dresses.
Yeah.
It's just
sorry. So I wanted to pose these questions because with critical hope, one key tenet is about really understanding yourself and the struggle and the conversation regarding social justice, and that requires some self-work. So some questions to ask, and please, I would encourage you to drop your answers in the chat. What do you do to thrive with hope in a complicated world such as today's? How do you grow alongside your students? And how do you center escape, joy, and or rest in your life? So I'll open that up, take about 1 or 2 minutes, and please drop your answers into the chat. Give everybody like 30 more seconds. Like I said, please feel free to drop your answers into the chat about the questions. Bring it back. Um, Thank you everyone for putting your your thoughts on these questions into the chat. One of the things that Kari Grain states, and she's a scholar that's really helped to move critical hope more forward, feeding off the work of um, feeding off, developing, and evolving some of the work that Jeff Duncan Andrade has done into a great way. One of the things that she discusses is that critical hope is messy, it's really uncomfortable, and there's contradictions happening all over the place. So even in the moments where you feel like I need to be invested and involved and keep fighting the good work while also knowing that there's policies, procedures, behaviors, and different attitudes that go against it, and even personal thoughts, just based upon like where people stand and go into it. We try to be as optimistic as possible amongst an environment that can be seemingly negative. And that's part of the beauty about critical hope, is because it asks you to directly engage with that, knowing that contradictions are a part of our world and how we go to make change. So being able to see like where we can thrive with hope or grow alongside of our students, and even find moments where we center ourselves and just take a little bit of time for ourselves to escape or to be in rest or to have some joy, are really are really, really important. And so I would want you to start considering some of this, but I know some of my presentation will also discuss what critical hope is and then how we can talk about it in the world today. All right. First, just to give you a little bit about me, I am a doctoral candidate at Florida State University. I am especially glad to be here because I give a shout out to Dr. Laura Vaughn. We are in the same program, so I really appreciate being able to come and talk with all of you from Laura, getting me involved in this. So I really appreciate that. I also serve as a senior academic advisor at the University of Texas at Austin. It has also been Austin and Texas overall. It's also been a hotbed in terms of what we're thinking about when we're engaging in conversations regarding critical hope. And a lot of these changes that are happening within the United States are reflected right here. And my work in higher education has been about 12 years, whether that's been on the academic side or a student affairs side. I have found great pleasure and immense joy in being able to be a strong support for students, to be a mentor to professionals who want to be in this field, and ultimately help students become critical thinkers and critical engagers in their environment while they spend their 4, 5, 6, or however much time years with us. My role is to really help to support them in that. And I think when we discuss critical hope, understanding positionality is really key and critical because hard work grounds who you are. And even with my work and my interests, reflecting back and seeing like where I am now and where I was is really important. So let me discuss some of my research interests with you as another part in terms of leading to how I got to critical hope. So I kind of have like three main influences on how I got here. When I look at my life and becoming like a scholar, a researcher, I tend to say some of the best scholars tend to be pretty free thinking, but somewhat stuffy, a little insular. And I think that's what helps drives our work as researchers, that we know our niche, we know where we want it to be. We're willing to go back and forth and reconcile like what that area, what our area of specialty means for us and how it continues to develop in the world. And I think that that's just good rigor when it comes to that. As I've come to discover my identity as a scholar, three things really center it. First, liberation has always been a central tenet in all of the work I've done in my life. While it can be defined in many ways, I tend to look at liberation in the same way that Jordan Harper did in his article on leadership or liberation 2024. And he states it as seeing liberation as a struggle, the push and pull away from dominant and oppressive status quo systems that have long prioritized dehumanization and subjection, and instead creating and demanding life-affirming futures built on collectivity, mutuality, care, and justice. To call liberation a struggle means that such transformation may not be fully actualized, but it is still worth fighting for and imagining. Liberation is rooted in social, economic, and labor justice. It is all at once anti-capitalist, anti-racist, and non-extractive. And for me, I really look at this definition and it really helps to frame out kind of like my past self to my current self now, and understanding myself as a person being bound by invisible hegemonic rules that continue to dictate the world that I live in. It's also been integral in understanding that I must continue the work that and to create the world that I wish to see, one that values humanity, one that looks at each individual and sees their humanity full and through, one that is emotive, has emotion in it, and that there is freedom of expression for forward-thinking collective environments. None of this would be possible without also understanding that I am a Black man in the United States of America. And I see my work as deeply personal. It has to be connected to me because that's the way that I tend to understand the world. And I see my work as deeply personal, espousing the principles of Ubuntu and rooting my humanities and within others. I am because we are. I am because you are. In this, I see myself deeply tied to my identity as a Black man who is rooted within a world that continues to scrutinize, press upon, and try to erase my existence. My work concerns all Black students, but my current dissertation work has been focused on Black college men, something that I highly identify and something that literature has grown and developed over the past 10, 15 years to really highlight what areas where we need to help Black college men continue to grow and thrive in order for them to graduate. Lastly, and probably the most influential in terms of my work within my doctoral program, is that I ground my work within leadership development. I, with a particular focus on student leadership. And part of this came, I got a chance to work with the Leadership Learning Research Center. Shout out to them. And that really helped to actualize all of these things that I love and being able to put that within the classroom, do presentations, do research on it. And I tend to define leadership in a couple of ways. First, Joseph Brost in 1991 kind of defined leadership as an influence relationship amongst leaders and followers who intend real change that reflect mutual purposes. In a very shorthand version, I kind of see leadership as being the change that you wish to see by gaining the skills, attributes, confidence, and understanding to do so. That kind of description that I gave also follows the work in terms of Dr. Bertrand Jones, Dr. Kathy Guthrie, and Dr. Laura Austin about the culturally relevant leadership learning model, where they talk about identity, capacity, and efficacy, and how we work with students. Providing a direction to Ross's definition of leadership, I look to lean my sense of leadership and leadership development as one that empowers individuals, has a moral leaning, and looks to create social change. So, looking at all of this, the journey to critical hope has really just been in understanding myself and what my interests were. I think that this informs and defines several things: my positionality, my research agenda, and ultimately the way that I lead my life. I feel that as a scholar, I embody my work as a way to honor my existence and honor my family and the people who have come before me in the different areas that represent my life. Being full of critical hope is critical to this, where I've waded through difficult times in my life, where I've had to look to be critically thoughtful, insightful, and how I can look to be critically evaluative of the world around me. While my personal experience and history is rooted in all this, two really key moments during my journey helped to really cement this. First, getting a chance to read John Dugan's text called Leadership Theory, Cultivating Critical Perspectives, got gave me a chance to learn about critical hope. What was even better is that I actually got to talk to Dr. Dugan at ILA in 2022, and that was a great experience for me to like really expand on this critical hope theme. And the second thing was also reading Davida Basundat's Cultivating Critical Hope, the too often forgotten dimension of critical leadership development, in that she ties critical hope as necessary within a leadership mindset, a leadership development mindset, and how we work with students to grow and develop. I think that this work really centered at how I look at leadership as being important, aligned, and ultimately deeply intertwined with the work of critical hope. So I've said a lot. So what is critical hope? It can be defined in multiple ways, and I tend to look at things as kind of like a historian. So I like to bring what started it and bring move up through the timeline in terms of how we can look at like definitions, practices, and different things. So critical hope can be defined in multiple ways. One, critical hope was developed from Paulo Freire's seminal work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, to describe how folks need to continue to work towards liberation because hope is an application of the privilege. There, Freire is really talking about how hope is positioned as wanting something and looking forward to the day it happens. It is it really looks at hope and hope specifically, not critical hope, but hope specifically as passive, naive, and without active engagement for those who wish to basically partake in hope. Being able to say, I wish for this, I wish for a better world, I wish for a better academic environment, I wish for this. When you look deeper into it, hope really rests on the laurels of those who can benefit from it the most, situating it with the hegemonic norms. So when Freire discusses this, he talks about people of color, underserved populations, minoritized groups being able to do hope because hope doesn't intrinsically benefit them. It benefits folks who are in power who do the oppressing to these populations. Jeffrey Duncan Andrade, who I discussed earlier, and who is probably one of the most important people talking about critical hope, popularized and really brought this term to the public through his work, Note to Educators, Hope Required When Growing Roses in Concrete. And he based his work off of Barack Obama getting elected into office. And he kind of develops critical hope and sees it as being able to have Socratic hope, actively examining the world, one. Two, material hope, equipping people with a sense of direction and control needed to deal with today's issues, thinking about resources and kind of mentorship and guidance. And then three, having audacious hope, knowing that where you stand is going to be in defiance is of hegemonic norms, and it is a collective capacity where you are really working to humanize people, humanize hope, develop healing spaces, and ultimately resist and defy dominant ideology in order to realize the humanities of all. I find that critical hope is deeply rooted in the work of both of these scholars and should be situated as well as within your own personal definition as well. I think when we think about how we tend to define these things, I don't always remember the scholarly work, but I do define it based upon the framework that I've had that is inspired and follows the work of previous scholars before me. So how I tend to look at critical hope is pretty simple. I look at it as envisioning a better world through active participation today to make it happen. Instead of the privilege of naive hope, we we work to make the change we want to see today. Um, I may not live fully to see all of the work that I've done, whether that's in the form of articles, whether that's in the form of activism, whether that's work in the classroom. Work will continue to persist through me, but I want to have my piece in being able to create a more equitable world by doing it here and now. And the way I look at it is really simple. Like, let's look to better the world around us. Let's look to treat each other with both kindness and criticality, meaning that even if someone is your friend, it's okay to be critical because that's how people grow and develop. And then third, let's look to examine the world as continually becoming. I brought up that question before about, how does like being able to escape and being able to have joy and rest impacts your work. That's a state of becoming because you're always becoming more, you're becoming better by engaging in the moments here and now. As people, we continue to flesh ourselves out by being able to continue to become, meaning we're growing, we're developing all the time. And so it's never perfect, but it's never too late to participate. That's the beautiful part about all of this and the way that I tend to look at critical. All right. So, in the ways that my research has gone in, maybe a way that you can take away from this is I tend to look at critical hope in two ways. I think there are other scholars who do it differently. I tend to visualize structures and systems in my brain. So that's the easiest way to interpret it. for me. So critical hope does require this sense of critical consciousness. It requires a need, a want, and almost like burning desire to do better for the world, to create change for yourself. But it kind of goes in two ways, in the ways that I've been researching. So the first is within the classroom, and you can think about this from like a teaching, a pedagogy stance. And in this way, it follows more closely to the work of scholars such as Patrick Ainley, Joyce Kanan, Michael Zimblius, Vivian Bozolek, and others who have seen this work engaging with students directly in the classroom. There's a vested interest in combating neoliberal norms within the classroom that have been passed down through state, local, national, and institutional policies that impact the way students see, understand, and participate within education. Here, critical consciousness or conscience critical consciousness. But Paulo Freire calls it, he has another term for it, I just continue to jumble it, becomes critical in having students understand themselves as oppressed beings, understand others as being oppressed, despite what their situation is, and being able to empathize with that. And then ultimately looking to create change through classroom interactions. So building up and kind of scaffolding these things where we can get students to be critically engaged in their environments. Here, liberation is more focused on work through discussions, work through the mind, and kind of freeing that work. The second approach that you could look at critical hope as is within a form of activism. I think for me, work in the classroom and activist work don't necessarily need to be separate. It's just, I think that how it's discussed and described looks a little bit different. So the second way is through this activist approach, the work of Jeffrey Duncan Andrade, the work of Stephen John Quay, the work of Kari Grain envisions critical hope as a practical work outside of the classroom, as engagement within your environment. Quay looked at it and how students engage in clubs and organizations and leadership opportunities. Kari Grain is looking at it, bringing in her own personal experiences and how, as she's engaging in critical hope, and how other folks can engage in critical hope that is deeply personal, but it's impacting your environment. All of these authors see this as critical and centering oneself within their work and in the work of others. Here we see critical hope becoming more centered in activist practices, looking to transform the world around them and liberatory and in act liberation through action. So looking to be physically down on the ground, doing the work, rooting your humanity within others, and ultimately creating change outside of the classroom. I think there are components that jump back and forth between both, but these are how I tend to understand it. And I think it provides a way for others to be able to understand how this can go. And then, why is critical hope important today? I see it as important for the work that we do today. For all of us who may be working with college students, who may be working in higher education environment or associated with higher education environments. With worldwide issues today, some tips that I can provide you include these. So I kind of frame these within the work of Jeff Duncan Andrade in terms of how he looks at critical hope. So that Socratic hope area, asking good questions, especially those that deny the humanities of others. Being able to question in your environment, why does this policy exist? Why, how can we think about what's happening on the national level and how is it impacting our institutions? Like, how am I being impacted by these things? Continually stimulating and engaging in those critical questions is going to be really important. And being able to do it in community and in discussion with others helps to create a dialogue that evolves how we look at critical hope from being more of an individual effort to a collective effort, which is what it aspires. And thinking in a vein of material hope, looking to figure out what resources you can utilize to help you and your students around you. You can only do so much as one person, but part of that community, collective, collaborative base is also thinking about what can you do together and what can you utilize around you, whether that's within the school, if you're working at an institution and looking at like resources there, whether it's different offices, things of that nature, or looking to even getting involved in your community. Critical hope has no boundaries as defined by like academic sense. And then the last one is audacious hope, and arguably the most important and can be the most difficult to do. How I would describe this is learning your moments to be open and supporting, being open with like your want and your need for change. And that language can look different, but looking to ultimately do it in the support of others you work with, as well as the support of students. Social change is being stifled in a lot of ways today. And it makes it difficult to maintain good critical hope towards that. But that's why it's even more important today. You don't need to go out and be all the way like loud and proud and making it seem like I have to be this particular way in order to enact critical hope. Critical hope functions differently depending upon who you are. That's what I mean about it being personal. Find areas where you can show and utilize your call, your need, your burning desire for social change in the spaces where you exist, because your work is necessary for students, for your personal lives, for your professional lives, things like that. The last thing I could recommend as another tip and another resource are kind of these three books. I had discussed all of these in some way, shape, or form throughout the presentation, but Critical Hope, How to Grapple with Complexity, Lead with Purpose, and Cultivates Transformative Social Change, Kari Grain, is a tremendous read. I highly encourage everybody to read that. It's been a very influential factor in terms of the direction of my dissertation. I would also recommend for anybody involved in education, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It is a seminal work that really looks to resist dominant normative frameworks in light of recognizing everybody's humanity. And then Discerning Critical Hope in Educational Practices, which is an edited text, has different articles, research, chapters about the work that people have been doing, implementing critical hope through their own perspectives. And with that, thank you for coming. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or thoughts. I'm more than happy to talk with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Darius, for your presentation. So with the time we have, I'm going to, open up to the audience for questions. But to get us started, I have a couple of questions already ready to go that we will go to first. So the first question is and if I could have somebody copy and paste the questions into the chat, that would be great. Thank you, team. With the current political situation in the US and with you being from a southern state such as Texas, how have you used critical hope within your own work?
Thank you for that question. I would definitely say the work I do advising students, I tend to utilize what I discussed earlier, kind of more of that in the classroom approach and criticality with students. So when I meet with them, there's a lot going on in the state, in addition to students just trying to figure out how to live their lives too. So when I normally meet with students, I will ask them questions, not only traditional advising questions, but like, what is it that you want to do, and where do you see yourself making an impact in the world? I want them to think about like not only them getting this degree means that like they've been able to get a bachelor's degree, but also like what is that, how's that bachelor's degree going to set you up for the type of life that you want to live? And does that life that you want to live incorporate like thinking about other people as well? So I tend to ask them a lot of questions that really hone in and focus on how can I create a better environment around me through the work I am doing now as a college student, as well as afterwards.
Awesome. And again, I encourage anybody from the audience, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat. Again, I've got some questions that I can continue to ask, but if you have questions that you think of, very much encourage you to put them in the chat. The next question is, how have you encouraged, and I know we didn't really talk as much about resilience since our main speaker on resilience was sick today, but how do you encourage resilience as well as hope in the students that you've worked with who have a lot of fear, especially, when we're looking at international students, those who are, have fear of being deported or being arrested. How do you kind of help navigate some of that?
I think resiliency is key, because you need to know like you're going to be faced with a lot of pressures in the world and in life, and knowing where to stand up against it, and know sometimes what can be hard on your back, for lack of better words, or figuring out, wow, this is really pushing against me. How is it that I can maintain my sense of self and my position while being able to go through this is really important. And I tend to see that as like having tools in the toolkit. When it comes to like some of the changing legislation, like around like student status, especially in Texas. I tell students just make sure that knowledge is one of the biggest things that you have. So I encourage students, especially those who are international, go talk to our global office, and being able to understand what your rights are, and understanding like what you need to be a full-time student here and maximize everything. When I talk with students directly, I also talk to them about full-time status. So if they're looking to drop a class and they're like, I need to get out of this class, and it's just like, let's frame this as a bigger conversation, because for you, it's different than students who are U.S. citizens. This may impact your status. And so I want to be sure and certain that not only do they walk away with me being stating, okay, um, maybe let's think about what we can do instead. I also want them to think, you really should think about this seriously, because this truly impacts you. And that's what I mean about like deeply personal. From before, is just like when you figure out what's personal to people and what connects with them, I think that's where critical hope really arises from. So being able to discuss like how is this going to impact you, and then think about like how does this also impact others as well. We need to equip ourselves with the tools that are going to help us. So knowing the resources on campus, knowing policies and procedures, knowing who their advocates and support systems helps to develop the tools of resiliency, and ultimately is a way to think about things.
Awesome. So we do have a question from the audience. What do you do in an environment where the tendency is to remain positive to the point where some of the necessary and hard things are being ignored?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, and I can speak for me, and I think it relates somewhat that folks can use, is I think in environments where you tend to be positive, I think positivity exists in different ways. Um, I know for folks that I work with, I am notorious for being a critical person, always at the table and asking questions, and criticality and positivity are not always equated to each other. And what I would say is reworking the framework in terms of like that perspective is really just being you. I think that criticality is a way to look at positivity. And so when I feel like I want to say something or need to say something, that's where you should put it in. And it's just by asking simple questions. I think there's always ways that we want to be deep and get in like directly into like what's being discussed. But I think first hitting those points of like, for necessary and hard things, it may just be sometimes reframing it. So for instance, when I will talk to a student, they may be telling me a lot about like what's going on and why they need these specific classes and things like that. And I'm like, all right, what is it that you want to do? They tell me it has nothing to do with the classes that they're taking. So I just ask a question like, why are you doing this? and it starts activating the thoughts and putting it through a test. And I tend to say, like, if you could get through 3 of my questions and not stumble, you're pretty certain about what it is that you want to do. I think applying that more in a policy and procedure context is just asking for the deeper, like not the deeper information, not like in that way, but just asking, like, can you explain this more to me? So if I see this policy and procedure, can you explain this more to me? And really try to get in more towards understanding how and why that came about. When you're equipped with the knowledge, you're able to figure out how to change and adjust it best. And so while, I think working with students, sometimes those seem to be a little bit more simplistic and really rooted in what it is that they're looking for out of life. I think the same for policy and procedures, like what is this policy and procedure looking to do to impact students. And now that I know this by asking questions of my supervisors and folks around me who help to craft and enact the policy, what can I do to really take a look and move forward with positivity, which in my view is criticality as well, in terms of doing the best I can.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a really great question, and I hope you don't mind if I add a little bit of my tidbit as well, because I'm aware of like the environment where positivity can get a little toxic, where you're only focusing on the positivity, and so I think keeping a touch of realism so you can have hope, you can have critical hope, but as long as you're being realistic and asking those questions, like Darius was saying about making sure of like, okay. Yes, things are, we're trying to stay positive, but in a realistic sense of, approaching that environment of like, yes, we don't want everybody to get super down. So there is that need to be positive, but in a realistic way. So thank you, Elizabeth, for that really good question. And again, encourage anyone else with questions to please put them in the chat. Um, so I'll go on to the next question on my list. So, how are you seeing colleagues and peers utilizing um, their own resilience and critical hope when dealing with challenging circumstances, especially the ones that have kind of happened within the past year?
I would definitely say dialogue has been the biggest factor in this. When I think about like the peers I work with day to day, probably our greatest tool is that we can directly talk with one another and do peer sharing as well as like inquiring with our supervisors about um, what we need to do in order to best help students. Recently, we just went through, we call it deadline day, where there's a lot of registration actions. And it's a big day. There's a lot going on that day. And I think like just like that looks like more ground level resilience, but it's like not only being able to be inspired by our leadership, who are like, there will be students who are coming all the time. You got to be able to rest where you can, while also being able to do what you can, and that their rush is not necessarily your rush. And realizing when we meet students with a calmer head, we're better able to help them and approach things. I think when it comes to critical hope, it feels like 1,000 things are happening at one time. And really one tool of resilience there is just like, slow it down and kind of bring it into your own perspective as well. When things seem like there's 1,000 things going at once, your immediate thing is, I need to move as fast as I can to address. Most of the time, those issues are going to take a very long time to address in some way, shape, or form, especially as we're thinking about like new policies that are coming out through the US, all these changes that are happening, gas prices are rising. That's going to be an issue we're going to continue dealing with. And it's just like, we can try to get as much gas as we can and kind of hoard it, or we can think about like, what can we focus on now and really emphasize during this moment right now where we're kind of dealing with this, because this is going to be where what I can do in this is very minimal right now. So what can I do to really emphasize other areas that help? in different places. So when you're dealing with challenging circumstances, know that it's bring it to your time and your perspective, so then you can figure out how can I address these issues one on one or two on one if you're able to multitask and things of that nature.
Thank you. So next, what are signs that resilience strategies are working and or critical hope strategies are working? And what are
Hmm.
signs that they might be masking burnout instead?
You know, I think one sign that critical hope can mask burnout is when there can be a lot of negativity and it's deeply impacting the person that is being negative, things like that. And that may just be like, I need to find working with them to say, I need to find a way to recenter myself. Or resilience can be being there's a way to be strongly attuned with the world, but not let it impact you as much in a way that can be debilitating, that can really impact your day-to-day practices. And so I think even being able to see like people who are receptive and feel what's happening and being very overwhelmed by it to the point of like not being able to do much. Um, that's a real sign that resilience may not be working as well. And so being resilient in that case can be like being able to know what's going on and being informed as a knowledge stance. But when it hits you and you feel and you're feeling it and it's deeply personal and emotional to a point where you're just like, I don't know what to do moving forward with that. That can be a sign of being burnt out, and especially because there's something new every day. There's probably like five things that happen every day. There's something always happening with the news, with things. And so being able to really understand like who you are and how things affect you, and then also being in conversation with other people so it lightens the load and they can help you get other perspective in terms of what the issue is, can help to knock out some of that burnout. And then a third thing, as well as what could be masking burnout, and I think especially working with students is when there are points where you're going to have to work a little bit more harder than they are. But I think about this from an advising stance. If I'm doing more of the work for the student and more investment in it than they are, there needs to be a way to getting back towards that balance. If I'm seeing a bunch of students and what I really want for them to be is critically engaged in how their schedules are set up and what they're thinking about their classes and the big questions that they want to address throughout their college life. If I'm investing more in that than they are, then that's what leads to negativity and more of that burnout too. And I think a way to address that is figure out the points where you can get the student engaged and saying like, show me your audit. Show me what classes that you think you should take. They don't necessarily need to be quote unquote right. In the case of classes, sometimes that is right. And that can like right and wrong. But I think when you're thinking about the classroom and you're opening up for discussion and you're opening up for different ways of understanding, encouraging that gray area as well as wrong answers helps to develop criticality in terms of, oh, I can see how I got that wrong. Or, oh, I see how you got to that answer. And that's a different way to approach this. Or I can see this discussion on leadership going this way, tell me more. And encouraging that and really pushing the bounds of meeting students where they're at to be able to do.
Great. So I think we have time for one more question, and we've got one in the chat. So, connected to the burnout question, where do you see critical hope in higher education environments where often folks are just overworked and only hope to get things done versus get things done they hope for? And what's needed to shift these environments?
Okay. This is a
Great
good
question.
question too. This is a really good question. Okay. So I think environments, one of the key things that I've seen, especially in coming into my current role, is I think like training helps in a lot of these aspects. A good training, especially being equipped with tools, being equipped with knowledge, is really important in terms of critical hope. So if in areas where you feel overworked, sometimes and you're just hoping to get things done, sometimes it's a matter of training and not having good training to figure out like what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. Other times it's just being piled on with work and you're like, I hope to get everything done, but there's just a lot going on. And I think critical hope can be found in just taking the time and the opportunity to space things out and see where things can fall. I think it's also where you need to see how to prioritize yourself so that you can continue doing the work that's important to you. You know, in this day and age, especially when we talk about job employment, especially you know, for folks who are going to school and want to work in the US and they're international students, you know, a lot of times we're thinking about like just having a job is good or having a job that's able to get me like what I need, such as like a particular visa or something like that is really important. But I also would say that there has to be some conversation with yourself in terms of what is this doing to me? And if what this is doing to me doesn't allow me to be supportive and supportive towards students in critical and like higher education environments, or at least working towards the social change I wish to see, that's a conversation that you should have with yourself. I think sometimes we find it as a point is like we got to keep going, we got to keep going, we got to keep going, but until you slow down and really evaluate what's going to work for you and how that's like what that job is doing for you, that's when you start to understand like, all right, what can I do? Either like potentially transition to another job, finding different responsibilities within the job to really emphasize, um, or finding places outside where you can reground and recenter yourself. That's going to be helpful. I think versus getting things done that they hope for, I think it's more about like what is it that you're hoping to do and where can critical hope come in there before. So I'm always looking for ways to help my students and looking for like times where I'm like, all right, maybe a new document can help them, or a new way that I have a conversation can happen. But I get so caught up in like doing just general things like registration, or talking about classes, or their immediate needs that we don't get the chance to really do those developmental conversations. And where I tend to find it is just like helping to slow down those approaches and just really talk with students. I like to say that I'm lucky to be able to be with a place that is like, we really want to value the whole student. And so privilege does come as part of that. But I do know in past roles that I've had, it's also been trying to get to slow down the moment, even with all the competing priorities I have in my head, so that I can really talk with this student about like what it is that they need to talk to, not only about the things they have, but about some of the things that I see and want to help them become a more actualized person. I think what we need to do to shift these environments is learning more about like how to slow down these moments because we're always in such a rush onto the next thing. There's a new software being released, there's a new policy being released, there is new practices we need to do that once we start slowing things down, you really get a chance to kind of see where are the things where we can make adjustments, where we can fix in order to better help our staff, our faculty, students.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a great question and everything. And I think it is important definitely to sometimes slow down with how hectic things can be. And with that, we have reached the end of our session. Let me share. So again, yeah, so our time today is coming to an end, but we would like to take a moment to thank our presenters and um, our audience for giving us their time and commitment to this work. We would also like to remind everyone that we are not done. Next week, Friday, April 24th, we have another colloquium session, Allyship and Building Support Systems Across Cultural, Social, and National Contexts, which will be presented by Dr. Punita Lum, Dr. William Coghill Brintons, and Dr. Aisha Khurshid. We hope that you will please join us. Same place, same link, same time. So please join us next week. And before you leave, please scan this QR code that you see on the screen. And if you attend 3 out of the 4 sessions in our colloquium listed below, you are able to receive a certificate of completion. You must fill out the certificate sign-up form for each session you attend by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, May 6th. So again, please scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat. And thank you again for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you so much to Darius for being an amazing presenter.
Thank you for having me.